If you were worried about Kirby Yates, worry no more. It appears the deal is going through. What are they going to do to clear the 40-man spot? What are they going to do in terms of the general roster? We'll talk about it. Let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. This is a daily podcast covering the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. You can become an everydayer by listening or watching every day. And you can make that easier by subscribing to get notified when our episodes are ready or when we're going live on YouTube, like we are here on Tuesday night. If this is your first time listening or watching, welcome. I'm Samperio. That's Jeff Snider, and we are the co-hosts of Locked On Dodgers. We've been doing this podcast here going on 7 years now. We've been covering the Dodgers for over a decade in a few different ways, and we've been Dodger fans our whole life. So there's a lot of Dodgers that we've talked about, a lot of Dodgers that we've seen, and a lot of things Dodgers that have happened in our lives. And one of those things appears closer to be happening. Kirby Yates, we hadn't heard much since the initial reports a little over a week ago that he was signing with the Dodgers. Maybe some people were starting to get concerned. We tried to quell some of those concerns a little bit on yesterday's episode. And, other than the Dodgers not making it officially official, it's Jeff Passan official, which is pretty much good enough for us these days.
Yeah, Mark Feinsand first reported tonight that Yates had passed the physical, and then Jeff Passan stepped in. And once Passan is on board, then you know it's real. He is probably the only guy on the beat who hasn't humiliated himself, because he is very careful to not speculate and just report news when it's actually real. And so you can always feel good. And then Fabian Ardaya confirmed it through his sources. So plenty of people in agreement on this. It's a 1-year deal, $13 million with two potential bonuses, $500,000 at 50 games pitched and another $500,000 at 55 games pitched. So potentially up to $14 million total for the 1 year, which is perfectly reasonable for a guy as good as he was last year. Obviously, his age was the main factor in it only being a 1-year deal. But Dodgers have had decent success in the last several years of signing older guys with good stuff and getting a lot out of them. And I wouldn't be surprised if this does turn into a 2 or 3 year stint with the Dodgers for Kirby Yates, if all goes well in 2025. But I haven't seen as much crying on the internet about this one. And maybe that's because it was announced last week. Maybe people got all their Kirby Yates tears out last week. Or maybe it's just because the fact is it's January 28th. Kirby Yates has been a free agent for November, December, January, 3 months. And, if somebody wanted to sign him, there was plenty of options. I would like to think that people are starting to realize maybe this is on the other teams that aren't doing anything. Obviously, that's a pipe dream. People aren't going to realize that because hating the Dodgers is a very popular cottage industry these days. But hey, the Padres did finally make a move. They signed Elias Diaz. So woohoo, teams are trying. Dodgers just seem to be trying a lot harder than everybody else.
Yeah, when we talked about this, when it initially happened, we weren't sure of terms or anything. 13 mil doesn't sound, out of the realm of what I thought. I could have seen it being 15 mil and still being okay with it as long as it was a 1-year deal. The incentives are there for him. Like there's an extra $1 million if you can stay healthy, and if you're healthy, the Dodgers are probably going to use you. So that makes sense for him. And when it comes to the age, like his game's not built on velocity, and I think that's one of the biggest parts of why you can still see him, having success. He's very, very red on his baseball savant page in terms of high percentiles, but his fastball velocity is only in the 35th percentile. Like he doesn't throw that hard, but the movement, whatever else he had, the off-speed pitches, everything that he combines, he's a good pitcher. And when you're a good pitcher, and you're able to combine the chase rate, strikeout percentage, and if you combine good strikeout percentage with the fact that you don't allow the ball to be hard hit very often, that's a recipe for success, especially as a reliever in the later innings. And you would imagine he'd only get better with the Dodgers, helping him out with his arsenal.
Yeah, hopefully. And yeah, like you said, when your game isn't built entirely on fastball velocity, obviously his changeup is his big pitch. And in order to have an effective changeup, you need to have at least a nominally effective fastball to play off of, but also the movement on the changeup is a big thing too. The deception, as long as you have that separation. And we saw it with Clayton Kershaw. As his fastball velocity dropped, so did his slider and curveball velocity drop a little bit to maintain that separation, and he was able to remain effective. So yeah, I'm excited to see what Kirby Yates can do. It's kind of interesting to me. I remember when the Dodgers re-signed Teoscar Hernandez, I said, okay, now the offseason, the Dodgers have checked all the boxes they needed to check. They had holes, and they added Blake Snell. They re-signed Blake Trinan, and now Teoscar Hernandez is like they had completed the offseason. Since the Dodgers completed their offseason, they signed Hae-Sung Kim and Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates. And Roki Sasaki. Yeah, so the Dodgers have added the two best relief pitchers on the market, one of the best starting pitchers on the market, and a very promising Japanese infielder since they had finished. What's that? Korean. Sorry. Yeah. Since they had finished checking all the boxes they needed to check this offseason.
Yeah, it's been, the Dodgers, you could have graded their offseason after Teoscar, probably would have been A, or at the very least a B. You could have continued grading that after every signing, and it would have continued to be an A, or even if you're a tough evaluator, a B, or just not objective. But it's great, and we're starting the year where, like we've talked about with the roster, we're starting the year with not who's gonna make the 26 man, just who's gonna stay on the 40 man, and there is still a couple guys that make sense. We got the report that they were, shopping Ryan Brazier and stuff like that. But, where do they go from here in terms of the 40 man, and where does your Yates kind of sit with the 26 man? And, the Dodgers are big on flexibility, and they might not have that flexibility with all the guys they're expected to have in their bullpen. So we'll talk about that. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Listen, it's two teams left. It's the Chiefs and the Eagles. More than likely, you're not a fan of either of those teams. And if you're not, how else can you keep the game exciting than with FanDuel? Because they got prop bets, they got regular bets, they got straight bets, and there's live betting. When you see, the Chiefs are known to come back. If they get down early in the game, that might be a way for you to get in the game with FanDuel. So make sure to go download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. If you bet just $5, you'll win $200 in bonus bets. That's over at FanDuel.com. A $5 bet can potentially win you $200 in bonus bets that you can continue to use on the Super Bowl if you make that bet early in the game. So make sure to go to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. We mentioned first listen of the day, but we might be your last listen of the day if you're listening live here Tuesday, 9:42 Pacific time, whatever it is. If you're listening, we appreciate you. If you want to continue listening, we are here every week, 5 times a week, Sunday through Thursday, most of the time live, or Monday through Friday if you want to listen in the morning, whatever it is. Keep listening. We appreciate you. It's been, great offseason for the Dodgers, a strong offseason for Locked On Dodgers, and we hope to continue that into the 2025 season. All right, Jeff, we've had a lot of talk about the roster and different things, and to this point, they've cleared enough spots, or they're potentially clearing spots for guys like Clayton Kershaw, maybe Kike Hernandez, stuff like that. But with the Kirby Yates signing being official in the eyes of a lot of the big reporters, you got to imagine it's going to become official in the next couple of days. I don't think they're going to wait until they can start putting guys on the 60-day IL. Ryan Brazier's name was mentioned as someone the Dodgers were potentially shopping. We've talked about Michael Grove, as a guy potentially being shopped as well. Do we think the clearance of the roster spot is going to be a trade for sure, or is there any chance that these guys, I guess, if he had DFA'd, he could still get traded, eventually? So
yeah, and that could be a possibility. If they're 80% of the way to making a trade, they could DFA that guy. And most of the time that's not going to mess with their leverage in the trade, because the team acquiring, they could think, well, if I just let him clear waivers, then I can sign him, or let him, don't trade for him, then I can claim him off waivers. But then there's always a chance that somebody else will claim him too. So it would depend on where they are in the waiver line and everything. So that's a possibility. I would guess that the fact that now the news becoming unofficially official, all that leaking out right now, means that the Dodgers are pretty close to having whatever move it is done to clear up the roster. One interesting thing, our buddy Jeff Spiegel got himself into trouble, got a lot of people mad at him for suggesting the possibility that Anthony Bonda could be traded. And you and I talked a little bit about Bonda last night at the end of the show. And, Bonda and Brazier, like we said last night, are kind of the two guys at the bottom of the bullpen. We focused a lot on Brazier, but honestly, Bonda is in a lot of ways the left-handed version of Brazier. The guy, he has bad splits, and the difference is not terrible splits, but he's definitely, Brazier is much better against right-handed hitters. Bonda is much better against left-handed hitters, and the difference is there are more right-handed hitters than left-handed hitters in baseball. Not a ton more, but definitely more. And the Dodgers have, when you have Tanner Scott and Alex Vesia, who are both very, very good against both hands, an Anthony Bonda trade, he might be a guy who would bring more value than a Ryan Brazier. And so, that could factor into the decision to maybe shop him. I still think Brazier is more likely, but then you also have a handful of moves like, Hunter Fiducia still seems likely to me to get traded at some point. I would have thought it would have already happened by this point in the offseason, because he's kind of major league ready. He's already, he's going to turn 28 this year. So, I mean, he needs to be some major league team's backup catcher, and that team's not going to be the Dodgers. And with Dalton Rushing knocking on the door, they could probably afford to trade him. Obviously, if they are thinking about trading Chris Taylor, that could open up a spot if they could work that out. But I don't think that they're going to have a taker for him. So, yeah, I think it probably for this spot comes down to Michael Grove, Ryan Brazier, or Anthony Bonda being traded to open up this spot.
Yeah, this can go a little bit with I forget who it was talking to Brandon Gomes, and they brought up Michael Kopech and him missing the first month of the season, or the report on that. And you always take what these guys are saying with a grain of salt, because they're going to protect their best interest. But Brandon Gomes kind of said he's not sure what that report came from. Michael Kopech's been on his throwing program and everything else, so that would make things a little more murky, because when we talked about with that Kopech could be out, then you can move stuff around a little bit more, or you have that option of having an extra reliever at the time, and then you make a decision once you get to the point where he comes back. So if he wouldn't be on the IL to start the season, then yeah, there is less room than initially thought of. And, Brazier and Bonda, not only are they kind of in the same boat as being maybe the last two guys out of the pen, but they're also in the same boat of not having options. And, the Dodgers love their options. And right now, the whole bullpen of theirs, Alex Vesia is the only one with an option. And, realistically, that's not something they probably want to do. Or maybe that's why they're working on a deal with him to give him a little bit more money and say, we might option you a couple of times during the year just because, we might need some fresh arms.
Yeah. And when I think about Bonda specifically, I kind of think about Dylan Floro after the 2020 season, when Floro was a big part of the Dodgers winning the World Series. That who was it that he came in and struck out? Randy Arozarena got a big strike against Arozarena in the World Series. Huge part. And Floro was a fan favorite. Fans liked him and everything. And then the Dodgers traded him. People are like, what are you doing? But who they traded him for was Alex Vesia and Kyle Hurt. And they kind of, Floro has remained a solid reliever, but they kind of sold high on Dylan Floro. And I could see them, if they were to trade Bonda, I think that would be the rationale. We're selling high on Bonda for he's going to have more value to some other team's bullpen than he does to our bullpen with how star-studded it is, and could probably, Vesia and Hurt, like even if it had just been Floro for Vesia, the Dodgers win that trade. And Kyle Hurt, obviously is injured right now. I always have to make myself not say he's hurt. But potential for that to be a huge steal of a trade for the Dodgers. And, Bonda, yeah, like that. When I think of it in comparison to the Dylan Floro trade, I can understand the reasoning there.
Whatever the Dodgers end up doing, ultimately you're going in with a bullpen that is pretty legit 1 through 8 or 1 through 7, depending on when Ohtani comes back. So you're not necessarily. I think the one big difference now and why, maybe they're letting team doctors know, like, hey, if this guy's arm is sore, his arm is sore, and these guys might need those breaks here and there, and that might be the way they can not work around. But I mean, if a guy legitimate's arm is sore, which a lot of guys say by the time you hit, not April, by the time you hit June, July, like anyone can have some type of thing that would not require, but would allow you to take a couple weeks off and, be fine with that. And that's kind of where it is with this bullpen. And yeah, I think, Brazier's name was brought up. I think that makes it a little more likely in the sense of, hey, well, teams already know that he's available, but if I was another team, I would also be asking around to see who is those guys on the margins that may also be available for trade. And yeah, Anthony Bonda would probably be one of those guys that, while Dodger fans and maybe social media are very endeared to him, and I'm not saying the Dodgers front office isn't, but the Dodgers front office is not necessarily as endeared as maybe some people are.
Yeah. Brazier is also 37 years old. And so if you are looking for a guy who you can convincingly put on the IL a few times during the year, he fits that bill, although he's actually thrown a lot of innings a lot more consistently than Anthony Bonda has. Last year was the first time Bonda has thrown more than 34 innings in a season. And even then it was only just under 50 innings. So yeah, there's so many considerations that go into this, whether it's who has the most trade value, who has the most flexibility roster-wise for the Dodgers, all those things. So it will be fascinating to see. It does seem like we will get an answer, though, in the next couple of days, because while there's no actual time limit between the time when Jeff Passan tweets that a deal is happening and when they have to make it official, it usually happens relatively quickly. And so we probably will find out on Wednesday or Thursday.
I imagine before FanFest. Like I feel like they probably want Yates there.
Yeah, you would think so. So
yeah, so we we'll see, and we'll definitely talk about it whenever that does happen. Let's talk next about more owners that are crying poor, and not the Dodgers owners. So we'll talk about that. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Want to thank you for being an everydayer. If you are one, an everydayer is just someone that listens or watches every day. We recognize a lot of you here in the live chat on YouTube. We know there's a lot of you that are also Locked On Dodgers insiders, and just a lot of you that tell us that you are everydayers. We appreciate you if you are. If you're not an everydayer, don't be scared of commitment. We're only 30 minutes long, and if you can listen on YouTube or on wherever your podcast on 2 times speed or 1.5 speed or 1.25 speed, whatever it is, or even listen 30 minutes. So check us out wherever you get podcasts, YouTube. And remember, you can go beyond the podcast, come a Locked On Dodgers Insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You can get text directly from us, keeping you up to date with the Dodgers, and you can also get a link to an exclusive Discord server to talk Dodgers with other Dodgers insiders. So that's joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. All right, Jeff. So the Cubs owner a couple weeks ago was talking about how they can't keep up the spending like the Dodgers and Mets can, and that they're just trying to break even every year. Knowing that there are some figures that go out there that kind of, maybe say that's not entirely true, but regardless, now we have, the Cubs, who are, one of the most well-known brands in the baseball world, going to probably the most well-known brand in the baseball world now saying something in similar vein, right?
Yeah. It's kind of funny. You've probably seen this graphic if you're ever on social media, where it has a list of all 30 teams and their 2023 revenue and their 2024 payroll and what percentage of their revenue they're spending on the actual players. And it's interesting because the Dodgers have the second highest revenue, and the 2 owners that we've heard crying poor are the Cubs, the team with the third highest revenue, and now the Yankees, the team with the highest revenue. What do those 2 teams have in common? They both spend about 46.5% of their revenue on their players, while the Dodgers spend 60% of their revenue on their players. Hal Steinbrenner, the owner of the Yankees, you may recognize the last name. He is obviously the son of George Steinbrenner, who very famously loved to spend money and say, I bite my thumb at the rest of you. I'm going to spend as much money as I want to. Hal Steinbrenner said, I'm going to do my Hal Steinbrenner impression because it's a really good one. It's difficult for most of us owners to be able to do the kind of things they're doing. We'll see if it pays off. They still have to have a season relatively injury-free for it to work out for them. Guess what, Hal? The Dodgers, it already worked out for them. Remember, you played against them in the World Series and lost. The Dodgers, it's already paid off. Doesn't guarantee. Like we've said it so many times, Dodgers aren't guaranteed to win the World Series in 2025. But to say they need to have a season relatively injury-free for it to work out for them, I think the 2024 Dodgers proved that you don't have to be injury-free. The Dodgers, whatever the opposite of injury-free is, that's what the Dodgers were in 2024. And they won the World Series against Hal Steinbrenner's Yankees. If any team, maybe Hal Steinbrenner, if we give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe he is just thinking about those sad little other teams, like, for example, the A's, who only had $241 million in revenue, but also only spent 35% of that on their players, or the Rays, who there they are, only $301 million in revenue. And again, spent about a third of that on players. Maybe Hal's thinking of those poor teams. I think Hal is just making excuses for wanting to pocket more money rather than spend it on the team. And I love how the Dodgers owners and front office, so many different people have said the phrase, we're rewarding our fans. And that's what it feels like as a fan. Like, we show up, we put our passion into supporting the Dodgers. And it seems to me like the Dodgers ownership and the Dodgers front office feel a responsibility to reward that passion with the best team possible. And, like we've talked about several times, Vince, the fact that the Dodgers won the World Series and then went out and were the most active team in the offseason trying to improve the team, whether that's bringing back integral parts like Trinan and Teoscar, or extending an integral part like Tommy Edman, or bringing in new guys like Blake Snell, Roki Sasaki, and Kirby Yates, and Tanner Scott, and Hae-Sung Kim. All these guys, the Dodgers have done everything this offseason to say, you know what? It was fun winning the World Series last year. You fans deserve even more. We're going to keep on going. And it's just crazy to me that a Steinbrenner would say that. Like, usually I think when people say whoever is rolling over in his grave right now, I think it's hyperbole. In this case, can you imagine if George Steinbrenner was alive, how quickly he would smack Hal Steinbrenner's face for having the nerve to say something like that? Like, oh, we're getting outspent. We just can't compete with these other teams money-wise. George Steinbrenner, like, love him or hate him, he wouldn't let his kid talk like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, it's kind of, I guess the teams I root for are similar in the sense of, Hal Steinbrenner doesn't have his own money. He has what he inherited from his dad, and, which is a lot of different things, but it's, the Yankee enterprises is like the Yankees. I think they have the New York MLS team. I think they have a little bit of stake in, AC Milan. Maybe not a lot of active income. It's similar to like the Lakers and the Buzz family where, none of these people really have active income. It's, most of their wealth is in, these teams. If they, the liquid, it's not necessarily liquid. Same thing with the Raiders, like Mark Davis, like he doesn't have money. He has the Raiders, and the Raiders, he can have money if he sells the Raiders, but he doesn't necessarily have it. And I think maybe that, I don't know. I don't say that's part of it because you can spend more. Like, obviously, you're making the revenue as the Yankees to spend more. You don't want to for whatever reason, or you don't think you can. But to say, oh, it might not work out for them, they need health, when your team currently doesn't have a legitimate third baseman is funny to me because the Dodgers, they just signed Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates when they didn't need them. So now if there is injuries to other people, they'll have Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates, or if those two guys get hurt, they'll have the guys they had before, which were already, a bullpen that won a World Series. So it's just funny to see all these owners coming out of it just because, there's a reason they're both saying these things, and that's because they don't want the game to go the way it's going with the Dodgers spending all this money. And in order to, try and keep up, you have to spend some of that money. And it's pretty sad for that, for the Yankees to be at that point where it could have been a fun rivalry. Like Dodgers Yankees, they already met once. They just missed in 2017. Like maybe they could have met a couple more, and they still might. Like the AL is not that strong, but it would have been fun to see them competing for different guys throughout the years. And it seems like they might not want to go that route.
Yeah, the Cubs, Yankees, and Red Sox are the three teams that are in the top 10 in revenue and the bottom half in spending. And it's funny that it's those rich owners that are whining about this, and I guess it makes sense because if the A's owner starts whining, then that'll just remind people that he exists and people can start, hating him again. He's probably happy to let these rich guys take the heat. The Rays ownership is just going to sit quietly and keep, winning 85 games a year, 85 to 90 games a year, making the playoffs once in a while, having decent teams, and pocketing revenue sharing money. It's a very lucrative business to be in. Every single MLB owner is quite a bit richer than they were when they bought their teams. Values just keep going up and up and up. Revenue, even the Dodgers, like the fact is there's still $200 million between their revenue and their payroll. And obviously some of that is, they're spending $100 million to renovate the stadium and stuff, but Guggenheim is still making plenty of money on the Dodgers. But the fact that the Dodgers are making $200 million and the Rays are making $200 million, it kind of shows you that most of the money the Rays are making is coming from the Dodgers and other revenue sharing teams like that. And so it's, if the Dodgers are running baseball, that's great. And Hal Steinbrenner is probably right that, it's probably not sustainable. The Dodgers probably aren't going to have an offseason like this every year. But right now, I think they recognize we've got elite players, MVPs and stuff. Right now, I don't think the Dodgers window is closing anytime in the foreseeable future. but it is more open right now. Like the chance to win 3 or 4 World Series in a row is never going to be greater than it is right now. And the Dodgers are recognizing that and going for it.
Yeah, like we've talked about before, the Dodgers got Mookie Betts because the Red Sox owners didn't want to pay him. The Dodgers got Freddie Freeman because the Braves owners didn't want to pay him. And they got those two guys, and now they recognize, like, okay, we have a window, at least the 6 years that Freddie signed for, we have that window to go after it and get after it. And then you get Ohtani, who opens up that window a little bit more because of the deal that he took, and the fact that you now have 3 MVPs, and yeah, you want to take advantage of it. The Dodgers, the big thing right now is like the built not bought, but the Dodgers were built before, and they still had a high payroll, but for different reasons, getting out of contracts, taking on money in order to help better the team, whatever the case was. Now they have the high payroll that they're actually paying out to some of these players. But a lot of these players were acquired by some of those guys that were, traded or that were drafted and everything else. And the hope would be that now these guys can settle in. You have Mookie, Yamamoto, you have all these guys locked in for the next, 5 to 10 years, depending who it is. And you can supplement that with all these young guys that are now coming up, or those young guys turn into other trades that happen. And, you're building a sustainable thing where the Yankees have been sustainable, but it's kind of like the Steelers in football right now. Like, yeah, you're making the playoffs every year, but you're not really winning. And this year they did make it, but they weren't really competition for the Dodgers. Realistically, there were some close games, and yeah, but at the end of the day, like, it was a 5-game series, and that's not that competitive. And for the Dodgers, they're at a point, and there was a point here in the chat that someone said that, like, it's not 1 or 2 teams that can do it. Like, if every team signed one more guy to a deal of over $20 million, then the Dodgers wouldn't be able to collect all these guys. They might still, because we've seen guys turn down more money to join the Dodgers, but they probably could say, if someone had thrown, Kirby Yates $20 million, the Dodgers probably wouldn't have Kirby Yates right now.
Yeah. And if Major League Baseball wasn't rewarding, like, the fact that the first pick in the draft goes to the worst team, like, I understand the reasoning behind it, but what it actually does is incentivize the teams. There's no benefit to winning 84 games instead of 64 games. You're better off.
The last couple of years there has been.
Well, okay, let's drop those. Bit. You're better off winning 58 games than 78 games. Even though it is demonstrably better for your fans to win 78 games, because that is 20 more times that your fans came to watch you play and went home happy. And happy fans spend money, all those things. And so if Major League Baseball, that's probably a topic for a whole nother show, because they ought to stop rewarding teams for being bad on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to do that with the draft lottery. A couple of teams that have been mediocre have gotten into the top 3 or top 5, but I don't think it's enough to make you not want to, bottom out as the way of rebuilding. I guess there's not enough of it. So
yeah.
All right. Well, we don't have to worry about all that, because the Dodgers are the team that is spending. The Dodgers are the team that did win the World Series, and the Dodgers are the team that are, very excitable for the 2025 season. So,
yep.
You got anything else, Jeff?
And that's it for me today.
All right. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. You can become an everydayer by listening or watching every day. You can check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, 2 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network that are on YouTube. You can go beyond the podcast, come on Locked On Dodgers Insider at joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. You can check us out on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vincent91. You can DM us any questions or comments. You can also send those via email, LockedOnDodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us when you get in your car or sit on your couch. Here's my advice: play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We will talk to you tomorrow.